Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Carol Bowen with Associated Builders and Contractors, and this is a top legislative priority for us this session. A few of you have heard me speak on this bill before, so as not to bore you, I'm going to share a story and hope that that helps clarify what we're discussing today. Last week, I needed to take cash out, so I went to a local bank. I know it's local because where the business physically resides. It was down the street. I took out $20, but it wasn't my bank, so I got hit with a $3.50 convenience fee. But I'm sure that that helps the folks that work in the bank. I have to presume that they are local residents. I went to a local coffee shop and bought a coffee, which was great. It was about $2. I assume that everybody that works at that coffee shop is local and that their supplies are local and that those employees only spend their money locally, but I can't verify it. I can't verify anything other than the fact that I spent $6 for a coffee, which is fairly fiscally irresponsible of me and probably something that I won't do again. I will plan accordingly and make sure that I'm spending the $2 or so at Dunkin' Donuts because that's more cost effective with my dollars. I don't share this to be trite. I take this issue very seriously. But my point in this is there's no way for us to officially track every dollar that leaves our wallet and ensure that it goes to a local person and that that local person then spends it at a local store and that that local store employs local people. We're talking about fiscal trade barriers and we're assuming that what we're doing is the proper action. We know there are studies out there that have looked at this. The National Association of State Procurement Officials has looked over time at the long-term impact of entities that have geographic preferences in place. And what they found over and over again is competition decreases because whether it's the last look or the second bite at the apple or you're always the low bid but somebody else is within 10% and so they get it, those companies are going to stop bidding. And we also know that it costs more, to your point, Representative Goodson, because some local preferences are written in a way where if you're the local contractor and you're within 15% of the low bid, as long as you're local, you get the contract. So that public entity is simply willingly paying more per project than they could because a company's geography was deemed local by their zip code. There are some geographic preferences that say it's your building and it's your tax and then it's your employees. But now what we're doing is further delineating against local companies. Are you more local than the other guy? In some instances, if there's a tie between local companies, they look to see who the better resident of the local entity is. You know, who does more in the community, who gives more to charities. This is such a subjective practice that we've gone completely away from the competitive process that we think is important for public construction. One of my opponents in an article said we're being silly where we're talking about local dollars versus state dollars because it's the same pot. And I say, yes, I'm agreeing to that. Dollars are dollars that travel through our economy, and setting up fake geographic trade barriers because we believe and we find comfort in thinking that we're supporting somebody based on where their building location doesn't give me any sense of comfort that we're doing what we need to do with procurement. What we know to be true and what we've seen over and over again is that the more competitive a process, the more that your cost and your price drives down. And the more competitive process, the bigger talent pool you have. You'll hear that without local preferences, small businesses are hurt. That's simply not true. Small businesses have their own preference that remains untouched by this effort. You'll hear that without these preferences, local employees aren't hired. That's simply not true. General contractors do not build. They are the ones that secure the preference. They manage and they hire subcontractors. And it is a myth to assume that they come with their big entourages and drive into town with all of their employees, from the gentleman that sweeps the floor to the person that manages the entire project and then leave when it's done. Our local subcontractors make up the workforce of these construction projects. And so regardless of who the GC ends up being, yes, some of the profit may leave the county or may leave the state, but your local subs are the one who's building it and they benefit regardless. We do believe that a 50% threshold is fair. We've been requested to come up to that amount. We were requested to clarify what we mean by state appropriated funds, and we believe we've done that. We think that this is the most common sense approach to something that is a long-term problem for Florida if we remain committed to doing what's best with taxpayer dollars. And with that, I close.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen. Questions from the membership? We'll go with Representative Cumbie, followed by Representative Goodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You obviously have a lot of experience on this subject and you're passionate about this subject. I am guessing and I'm hoping that you can give me an example of a situation that really is a great example of why this bill is needed based on your work with ABC. Can you
Mr.
do
Chairman?
that?
We represent 98% of the industry in Florida, and so what I can tell you is this is my best example that I've had from one of my contractors down in South Florida. He is a resident of Jupiter. His company exists in Palm Beach County. He is a mile over the border in Palm Beach County. He's a mile over the border in Jupiter. He pays taxes in Jupiter. He has employees that live in Jupiter. He has employees that live in Broward County, but his office is physically located in Palm Beach. He's only local in Palm Beach. If he bids outside the area, his employees that come from Jupiter or Broward are at a disadvantage because he's at a disadvantage. And now he can no longer bid work at a competitive advantage, and he often loses out. So it may benefit him in one sense of where his office is located, but it hurts him if you look at where his employees come from, where he lives, where he's a good citizen, and where he pays taxes.
Good. All right, Representative Goodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you give any kind of credit to local preferences if the person is paying personal tangible property taxes, a company comes in from Michigan carrying a phone, a pencil, and a bond, so he gets to say he should be just as perfect as the contractor that has paid 30 years for all of his stuff, correct?
Mr. Chairman, if this bill passed, I would first ask if the 50% threshold is in. Assuming it is, and that contractor from Michigan comes in, again, it's the general contractor we're talking about,
Yes,
because it applies to him. If he's a competitive bidder, I guarantee you that general contractor is not shipping in the subcontractors from Michigan. I firmly believe that he's going to sub it out to the local workforce, and I know that because they call our office all the time and they ask for a list of viable subs. So I understand your concern that the actual general contractor may be from out of state, may be getting some benefit, but I trust and have verified that the subs are local.
Follow up?
Yes, sir.
Is there any exceptions that you could say local preference would be good? You say no. I'll ask you a question if I may have. Local preference on asphalt plants. You can't transport asphalt 200 miles. Mm-hmm. They're very expensive. So usually you have local preference on asphalt because they would say in the county, because the county might be an hour each way. I would assume you would agree that that might be a good local preference, or would you say that's terrible too?
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that philosophically, as an association, we have general concerns with anything that delineates competition. I would also venture to guess that in that instance, that company is probably fairly competitive because they are doing road work, and in order to do road work, you have to be fairly competitive or you're not getting those jobs in Florida.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. Bowen? Representative Schlossberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm just curious. We passed a bill about the flag, and that the flag should be made in the United States. How do you feel about that?
Well, Ms. Bowen, it's up to you whether you want to answer that question since it's not directly on the bill.
Well, Mr. Schlossberg, Representative Schlossberg is my representative, so I'm always happy to speak with him if that's...
Oh, you live in District 91?
I do, sir, yes.
Oh, wow, I love
I'm a
you.
local resident. I would appreciate some preference with your vote, if possible.
Oh. I'm sorry.
I don't think I'll get it.
I'll withdraw the question.
Respectfully, it's construction and not the production of flags, so I don't think it's germane. Thank you, Representative.
Very good. All right, any other questions? Yes, Representative Taylor. I don't think she live in your district as well.
No.
I do not, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whenever we are going through the competitive bidding process, it's not a guarantee that even if they have the preference, that they are actually going to be awarded the contract. And so my question to you is that how will you be able to determine whether or not this contractor, being local, received the contract based on them being local? In other words, if the bid comes in at $100,000, the other contractor bid is let's just say $90,000 from outside the community. Mm-hmm. Even if that contract is awarded to the one who bid it for $100,000 in the local community, how would you be able to determine whether or not they received that bid
Mr.
based
Chair.
on them being local and the preference?
most of these procurement processes are public, and so at some point the bids are opened up and everybody sees where everybody landed. And so if you are comparing straight numbers, some of the preferences are written. And again, let me back up. There are no preferences that are identical to other preferences. Even the ones that say there's reciprocal agreements, if you speak to those procurement officers, they don't necessarily honor their neighbors. But to your point, a lot of the preferences that are in existence do say if you're within 15% and you're the low guy, you automatically get the project. So when I'm in that public procurement bid opening and I look at that final dollar amount and I see that Company A, who's local, is 15% above me but got the job because I'm in the neighboring community and I'm the low bid, I'm going to be able to determine that that's how that happened.
Okay, thank you.
Good. For a second, I thought we were doing if a train leaves Station A from 40 miles. Any other questions for Ms. Bowen? All right, thank you, Ms. Bowen.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate it.
Chairman.
All right, we do